they say, okay, well, if a human doesn't have intelligence, can you kill and eat them? And if they want to be consistent, they would have to say yes, because they named the trait. Now, this is a trick, because they try to get people to name a particular, something like intelligence, something like the ability to just talk to each other and such. But if you skip past those particulars and you know enough not to name a particular trait that can be removed, the trait itself can be the category of human. Obviously, from a theistic view, you just say made in the image of God, and they have nowhere to go with it. But if anyone asks you this and they force you into this activity, you refrain from listing something very particular, and you go to the absolute, the category. The trait is human, they're human. That way, when they say, well, now you have to remove being human in order to form the contradiction, in which case, yeah, of course, a human who's no longer a human, someone you give moral value to, and they ask you to remove the moral value, of course, you couldn't make an argument for not killing them, because that's the whole basis for not killing and eating them. You don't even need to say eating. That's just doesn't matter. It really is about whether you can kill them. And so I wanted to go over that because I think some people may have heard this before and maybe got caught in it or trapped in it. And I just want to point out those traps. And I've just put in the vegan logic fails, a perfect cartoon. If you guys want to go over there. I just posted, and it's this, and it perfectly illustrates where this argumentation goes, which is they have to have the opponent, in us in this case, the person who is responding to, you better name that trait, tell me the trait that's, in a human that's not in an animal that justifies killing you. This is where it ends up. You end up denying the identity of either and making them equal, right? You equalize them. And this picture, I don't know if you went over there, it's a picture of a woman kind of in a animal-like hand-crawling position behind a fence, and there's a cow man carrying the baby. And this is exactly my argument against it, is that if you're asking your opponent to deny that there's two separate entities, right? There's a human and an animal. Well, when they ask you to remove the thing that makes you a human, an animal, and then they say, how ridiculous, now you can kill them, you're basically saying there's no actual difference between the cow and the human. And in this picture, this vegan thinks it's really clever. Really, all they're showing, and you can see it in the drawing, is that you cannot discern what the identity is. So is that a human or an animal human? Is it a human animal? Is it an animal human beast? And then the cow, they made to look like a man, and he has fingers, and he's carrying the baby away like a little farmer guy. This illustrates exactly the law of identity issue. Like the only argument is a cow is a human and a human is a cow, and this is the only way they could possibly illustrate their argument. Of course, it violates the law of identity. We wouldn't see this hypothetical because a cow isn't a man with genes and fingers carrying baby away, and they can't actually do that. And a human can do that. And so they're just asking you. There's this one guy who told me, hey, jimbob, he said, imagine you're a cow, right? This was his argument. Imagine you're a cow in line with your friends, and you see your friends on the line, and you're heading toward your bloody, terrible death with stabbing and blooding and choking. And he added all this emotive language. And then he said, and at the end, right before your death, you see two humans. One is me, the vegan, arguing for your life. And the other is you, who's just saying, I don't know, tell me the basis of your morality. Which one would you find more reasonable? Well, it's exactly like this photo, this picture. He's asking me to imagine a hypothetical where a cow is actually not a cow. A cow is actually a human who has a human mind, but still in the form of a cow, that is able to look at two humans and understand their philosophy and make a philosophical conclusion about those philosophies and choose one of the philosophies. This is the fundamental category error that veganism on whole must rest on. Otherwise, there's no, all it is. And there's two sides of the coin. If you equalize human and animal, are you saying animals should be treated like humans, or are you saying humans should be treated like animals? Because the consequence of equalizing them doesn't tell us which one is correct. So, is there anyone else who has something to say? Anyone? I don't want to shut anyone else down. And see Field Study, your mic's off.
Yeah. Hey, I was just gonna sort of bring up the fact that, human is a category within animal. So right. I'm not sure that sort of purporting that they are like a black and white comparison is super appropriate. I think that humans are a subset of animal, but so all humans are animals, but not all animals are humans.
Right. We can kind of loosely categorize them. I kind of reject human is animal. My theological approach is that animals are animals and humans are creatures, but all humans and animals are also all creatures. So I make a third category that encapsulates all of them. But the distinction between human and animal, to me, would be the entire, one, from my theological view, is made in the image of my creator. Two, I have evident to me is that I have some of the attributes of that mind, which is I have logic and reasoning and mathematics and philosophy, and I could reason and see violations of the law of identity and see contradictions or and these kind of things we have access to, which are not in the natural. And so I look at animals as the beastly world as creatures, but they don't have access to metaphysics. They don't have access to concepts about concepts, thoughts about thoughts. And again, from that argument, someone could just say, well, how do you know that? And that would just open up a transcendental argument of how do we know anything? Which there's only two ways you can go, is that you can't know anything, which is absurd, or you can know something because there's a source for all things. There's a precondition to all knowledge that we specifically as humans have access to that makes it peculiar. Because something about being the tree is that basically I found a roundabout way of defeating it in several ways. And one way is you could simply say the trait peculiar to humans is that we can play name the trait game. And so if you remove that and it equalizes human and man, and they say, oh, well, your end conclusion justifies mass slaughter of humans. Well, that could only be absurd if then the vegan can tell me why that's absurd, and he has to provide a moral justification why killing humans is wrong in the first place, which really is the only thing that's really important in the entire conversation. The rest is kind of like a parlor trick. But yeah, your distinction you said is, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm definitely very far from being vegan myself, but I do like sort of arguing. If someone is developmentally incapable of partaking in something like the name the trait game, does that justify killing and eating them?
No, because they're still made, in my view, made in the image of God, and they represent the set of humans who have access. So it's like they still represent it. So it's an appeal to, I wouldn't call it an error because I don't think errors are actually made in creation, but it's a condition that's not actually representative of what the full capabilities of humans are. So the full capable humans then recognize that as also human, and they say, well, they don't have access to these things, but they're still me. They're still me fundamentally at a metaphysical level, at a spiritual level. They just have a little less, because if you argue otherwise, you'd have to actually start developing a scale or a spectrum of a threshold. So what's a human that's a little bit better than that person? Or what's a human that's in the middle of really smart person and that person? And it's like, then you start attributing more value based on material. And that's one of the tricks of, as I said in the beginning, one of the tricks of the name the trait. They want you to name a physical, naturalistic trait, a particular. They don't want you to name a category because the particular, even from my view, I can't argue morality based on materialism. I can't argue based on science. I can't provide a basis for what's right and wrong based on naming ises, right? Because the is-ought fallacy at the material level doesn't work. That's been well established. So the trap is, if you name an is, they're going to break down your is-ought claim, and so they'll destroy you from that. But yeah, so I'd say category, that it's still a category. That's why you have to appeal to metaphysical categories, transcendentals, things that are metaphysical and fundamentally inaccessible to animals. Because here's why. Because if you say we have humans as a set, we as a category have access to these things. If the vegan asks you to remove those categories, then the vegan and us at that point couldn't actually make a philosophical conclusion that any view is absurd, because we'd lose those capabilities. So if you remove those, we're just beasts. We're just like, the end of that argument is just one of us making a peculiar sound given our biology and environment, and the other responds maybe with a sound that's totally incoherent and makes no sense. Anyone else? Questions? It doesn't even have to be fully on this topic, but I don't know. So yeah, I've been inside and other chats about this situation, and I just see a lot of problems. Hey, Tom.
Yo.
What's it saying on there? Spelling, form, dire.
Hey, Tom, your microphone's on.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. Where's Jimbob's debate going to be at?
Oh, that I already debated one dude. This one isn't a debate. I'm just starting my first Discord thing. But I debated someone over at Ask Yourself earlier, yesterday. On their server. Yeah, their server.
My bad.
That's okay.
Good stuff. What's currently going on right now?
Nothing. We just went over a couple of the common vegan arguments or games that they play, and how to kind of look at them philosophically and not just interact with them directly the way they want you to interact with them, because some of them are traps. And you will lose if you go into that trap. So
yeah, I've got personal friends who like to be. It's with me personally. Whenever you try to give an example of something, when they don't have anything to say, they always say you're talking between 1 and 2, and then they give you an example over at 13 or 14 so far away that you don't even really know how they get there.
Oh, like hypotheticals?
Just a hypothetical that goes so far out.
Oh, yeah. To name the trait game, they asked me to name the trait that makes humans different than animals. Essentially, it's the short version of it. And if I say made in the image of God, and that's my belief, the only place they can go to is they say, well, what if your God didn't make you made in your in the image? And so it's like, well, if you're going to criticize my worldview, you have to stay within my worldview. You can't just invent new things for me to believe that I don't believe in order to desperately find some contradiction. You have to stay within what I say I believe and find contradictions there. You can't just be like, what if? It was funny. One of these guys said, man, I said, well, human's a human and an animal's an animal. I'm a human, so I value human. And they said, well, what? The only thing they can do is say, well, what if you weren't human? And then at that case, all philosophical reasoning is gone because we wouldn't know the distinction between human and animal anyway. So, which they accept when they ask you that question. So their starting point, they assume and accept that there's a difference between human and animal. If their argument was really true, they wouldn't even start by accepting that first premise that humans and animals are different identities at all. They would just present us or me an argument that they're not, that they're totally different, And so even if they get you into a trap where in order to be consistent, you have to say, yeah, if you remove that trait from humans, I would have to be okay with killing and eating humans. And then they say, that's absurd. But then you go, well, no, now you have to name the trait that's distinct between humans and animals that makes that absurd. So it just goes back onto them, even if you could find yourself in an absurd conclusion or accepting some absurd consequence of what you've said, because they're going to go, oh, that's crazy. You just agree to a worldview where farming humans is okay, and you say, yeah, because you asked me to remove the thing that makes a human. So of course, but you, the vegan, you still need to tell me why that would be wrong or absurd, and they can't. They need you to kind of tell them what the moral code is so that they can ridicule it, but they will never be able to give you. Some do. Some say, well, it hurts, it's pain. Pain is the basis of morality. No, it's not. If you remove pain, then you could do anything to people then. Okay, not pain. Well-being, causing suffering, okay, so if I get my kid to go to the dentist and they're suffering, am I committing evil against them because they're suffering in the dentist chair? And then they go, no. And I go, well, no, then causing suffering can't be identical to immoral. And what you see with a lot of these worldviews is that they're so hung up on evil, which is okay because we are here in worldliness, and so it's around. We see a lot of what we consider evil, but what ends up happening is they want evil to exist as a thing on its own, and that would be like chasing darkness and trying to find darkness as an entity. Actually, darkness itself, as we see it, the absence of light. So you're chasing darkness, and then you're failing to see that darkness is always the absence of light and doesn't have its own thing. So all you're really looking for is light, really. And so you need light to point out where darkness would be, whether it's a shadow or the light goes away and you have darkness. The same with cold and hot, You describe, the coldness, whether it's, frigid weather or you're describing the coldness in the world. It's the absence of warmth. It's not its own thing. But someone who adopts a materialistic worldliness view of all things, they have no choice to appeal to the material sense of these things. And so they go to, well, evil is that action, and evil is causing suffering, and that's wrong. And unfortunately for them, they don't realize that they would need a standard for good for that to be the case. So only the standard of good could be established, not a basis for immorality. Immorality would be a consequence of good existing. So anyone who's arguing morality has to actually present a standard for good. And so that ends up forcing someone into a transcendental argument. Like they can't possibly give you a basis for good. I mean, Sam Harris tries it. I make fun of him in my live stream. He says, the basis is, optimizing well-being. Optimizing well-being and reducing suffering is obviously the most coherent, logical, rational definition of morality. And then you go, well, no, because you can have a group of people that establish the highest peaks, occupying the highest peaks of what he determines well-being, and they could have gotten to that high place by committing horrific acts. So that ends up being this weird utilitarian view where where the ends justify the means. So that can't be. If the highest peaks of well-being can be occupied by people who committed extreme acts of evil according to that own standard, absolute acts of suffering caused to other people, then it's a contradiction. So that doesn't work.
Is this meant to be interactive, or do I need to turn my mic off? I realize I'm the only one with the mic on.
No, you could turn it off. Someone else could talk or join whenever they want.
Okay. I got just one more thing real quick on their point of view. And this is something you referenced to a few weeks ago. And this is the same person. And he said, "Oh, I saw where they are controlling weather in China." And I said, "Oh, I told you that 6 or 7 years ago." And he said, "Yeah, but in his mind, his logic was, well, but why would they do that?" And it's just like, you don't have to understand the reason for it to be happening, just like the NASA and all that stuff you'd mentioned. But
reasoning. You gotta appealing to. Well, I can't think of a reason. Yeah, imagine that was the only basis of processing law. Is like if no one, like, obviously finding a motive helps because it adds an element, an angle of behavior. But imagine like processing what's possible as far as deception on the basis of whether you could think of a reason why someone would do something. I mean, I think that most people, a lot of people might be in that reality for themselves, where they're not even thinking that there could actually be a very large, well-orchestrated network of people who share goals and maybe even compete inside of their network, but all operate toward a certain worldly end, whether it's some sort of control over supply chain, whatever it might be, domination of the era of the metaverse or whatever. And you're like, there's actually no reason to assume that wouldn't be the case if it's ever present in human behavior constantly at every scale, even at the town level, like a town council. You could see some level of corruption immediately. Like, you're like, oh yeah, but it can't be that big. There's too, like my one meme. It's like, oh, there's too many people involved. So it's like, so you're saying corruption is clearly present. They're like, yeah, of course. And you're like, but conspiracies are not present. And they're like, yeah, no, not. I mean, not really. That sounds crazy. It's like, it only shows that the word conspiracies just simply developed coatings and coatings of stigma on purpose, and most of us know this. But to argue that corruption is rampant but conspiracies are silly is like, it's insane. It's like those two necessitate each other. Anyone else on veganism? You can, I don't know. You can talk about anything. This is my first time doing this, so I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to say it's a great platform. This is kind of weird, but I'll put stuff in the chat also on the under this heading. So I don't know. So people who are not necessarily comfortable with speaking, I know a lot of people here. If you jump over the chat side, you put stuff down in words. Maybe you don't feel so comfortable speaking.
Oh yeah, and I'll read it in the chat. If you don't want to speak and you want to ask a question to me or anyone else, you can put it in the chat.
Right. I know there's a lot of dudes here, women. So anyway, just helpful to and
thanks.
Doing great and fight the good fight.
Thanks. Oh yeah, Fairtex said if animals are not having the same discussion, then our human is done. Yeah, you could actually say that. You could say, okay, the trait is animals are not having this discussion. I named before. I just said, name the trait. Playing the game itself is a peculiarity of humans. And they go, what if you remove that? And then suddenly you're left with just two animals that don't have any philosophical reasoning power. In which case, even the vegan couldn't draw the conclusion of anything being contradictory or absurd, because you both removed the ability to think and reason and deal with concepts. So they're always asking you to equalize. Okay, remove it. A simple example that I did that really threw this guy off that I debated. I said, let me just reduce this for you back to you. What is true about your grandma that's not true about a random old lady that if you're removed from your grandma would justify you never talking to her again? And obviously the only thing, the major thing, it wouldn't be that she's sweet. It wouldn't be that she was there for most of your life. It would be that she's your grandma. That's a category. She's your grandma. You label the identity as it is. You don't describe a trait of the identity. The trait is the trap. You list the category, the identity itself as it is, just as you would with a grandma. So if they say, well, what if she wasn't your grandma? And then obviously you wouldn't be hugging her because you wouldn't know who she was. And it's probably a good thing that you wouldn't just go up and hug a random person unless they were, happy about it. And so, again, it's another example of that they're asking you through this game to negate or deny identities as separate identities, whether it's animal or cow. You could use any example, and it'll always look like the image that I put in the chat. It's like some weird half animal. Who's the animal? Who's not the animal? Who is the cow? The human? Why is the cow? The cow's acting like a human. It just doesn't. It's like a fantasy world. Animals eat animals is the best argument I've come up with. Some of these vegans. Well, I don't know what angle you're talking about, Nash, but they would say, "Oh, so then humans could eat humans if animals eat animals," And they're going to make they're trying to get you to make the distinction. What is it about humans that we don't eat them? Here's another thing. Here's another way to navigate this. If they say, there's another phrase of this that goes like, what's present in humans, absent in animals, that was absent in humans would permit you to kill someone else. It's a very important distinction to catch, because you're going to mentally in your head, especially if you're Christian or even a variety of other belief systems, you would accept that it's not permissible to kill someone, but you have to catch that little thing, that little trick, because it is actually permissible to kill someone. There are consequences, in my view, morally, and there should be legally, but you're still permitted. So this is a false starting premise, which is like this premise that you're not permitted to kill. Actually, you are permitted to kill. We're free to do whatever we want most of the time, and most of us make a choice, not just based on consequences, but it's in our nature to maybe think of that once in a while. But mostly we're fighting it because we have morality written in our hearts, and so it's not a trait. It's not like something very particular about a human, like how they walk or anything that makes us go, I don't want to kill them. I don't want to kill them. But the point is, you can do that. It is permissible. It's just that now you're arguing whether there's a consequence, and so that's another thing you can catch in the wording, which is harder to catch in the moment. That's why I'm doing things like this. And this isn't like a super important thing. It's just that it's more like fun, because you will run into these characters, and so it's fun to kind of like just look at the different ways these things are processed. What was the other? Oh, the other one was what was it? It was what's present in animals that if absent in humans would justify killing. This is another trick. If someone comes at you with this, it's a little confusing, right? What's present in animals that if absent in humans would justify killing them, killing humans? Well, no, you reject that it's a presence in animals that's shared in humans. It's the absence of what's absent in an animal that's present in a human, based on our worldview. Most of us here, if not all. There's a correction there. That's a false premise. It's not what's present in animals that could be absent in humans. It's what's actually not present in animals, which is, at the theological level, they're not made in God's image. But if you don't want to go that route and go full theological right off the bat, I mean, you can always go there. You just go, no, it's a false premise. It's not what's present in animals that would be missing in humans. It's that animals have an absence of what's present in humans, and then you could actually go and name the metaphysical categorical trait, not the particular trait. So, anyone else want to chat, talk, ask me a question? It doesn't have to be about this, even though this is the vegan logic fails. No one? Anyone?
I don't want to sound stupid.
Yo, jimbob.
Hey, Andrew, what's up?
Howdy. Do you have a quick or easy refutation on simulation theory? Why it's retarded?
Yes. Why is simulation retarded? I should make a new video channel called Simulation is Retarded. Simulation's retarded because if you click, there's a couple things. One, simulation theory is similar to metaverse theory or multi-universe theory, that Stephen Hawking. And the problem with it is a problem of knowing, because if you are in a simulation, how would you know? You wouldn't know you're in a simulation unless you could be outside of the simulation. But how would you verify that you're outside of a simulation? And that wasn't a simulation. So it's endless regress. That's the defeater, really. You couldn't possibly know the difference between a simulation that you're in and then being removed from it. How would you know that the removal wasn't part of the simulation? That's the ultimate defeater right there. But that applies to metaverse and multi-universe theory too, because let's say there's a universe, and this is how these people, which is cool, create text chats in the voice channel to coincide with the conversation in VNC. Yeah, some Birds Are Gray says you can create text chats in the voice channel to coincide with the conversation in VC. And eventually I'll bring over some of these other people. These other vegans, though, they're insane. Like I actually told this one person. This is how crazy. Told this one person that there was a company developing meat allergies, and he responded with an Alex Jones gif with a tinfoil hat. And then I said, well, no, it's real. And then he was startled, and this all happened within like 3.5 minutes. Startled, and then he said, that's crazy and stupid. And I was like, yeah, but I'm just saying there's a percent of you in your tribe, in your worldview, that's going to fully adopt this. And he goes, no, they wouldn't. No, that's too much. I said, well, they will adopt it. They will push this. And then, sure enough, 2 people came in and said, that's awesome. And within a minute, the guy who called me a tinfoil hat, then agreed with me how crazy it was, accepted that it might be a good idea. Like that's how fast that was. So, that's not like a black pill. It's just that this stuff coming down the pipeline as far as like mRNA, cellular manipulation, training the body to respond a certain way to things, and then doing designer versions of these responses is the fundamental apparatus that we're dealing with. It's like, it's not just metaverse stuff or blockchain or turning your body into a blockchain mining center and all this stuff. That's all like, okay, probably off there into the future. But it's the manipulation of the body and then the CRISPR technology that allows people to do designer sort of like manipulation, and a lot of this might end up being cosmetic and not performance based. And by cosmetic, I mean just like silly stuff like giving someone permanent goosebumps, like snake skin, like, really weird shit, demonic shit, worldly shit. pushing basically like, because here's the thing. What happens in the digital ends up occurring outside, and what happens in the outside then occurs in the digital, and vice versa. It's like a wave. It's like there's a line of behaviors, and then like a spiral going up that line, going into representation to reality. And so as people become lizards and shit in their avatars, well, as technology develops, then it's only logically follows that as these weird manipulations of genes and response to your body, as the culture adopts those things, then you can become literally lizard-like in some form or another, out in the real world. And so this stuff always gets like kind of like it's almost like a pendulum that has a direction, but its expression is swinging from representation digitally to representation physically. If that makes sense. Yo, plant matter. Plant matter, your mic's on.
It's nice, but
Hello. Oh. It's always fun to just hear a little nibble of people's lives, what's going on in their direct life through the microphone. Anyway. We got.
Hey, jimbob.
Yo, how's it going?
Good, man. Hey, when we were talking about Jean and all that stuff, it sparked in my head about X-Men. The Phoenix, the redhead Jean, how she was so powerful and stuff, and it took so much to contain her, destroy her, and yet she was the changing factor to a lot of stuff. And anyway, all that just popped in my head when you said.
Yeah. Well, definitely. You see through entertainment how they try to direct the associations to these things. I don't know if you guys remember, there's maybe a couple movies in the last 10 years that sort of, and a lot more will push it. And it's not just neurodiversity and representation, like, oh, we need an autistic person. It's the way in which they're being propped, like autistic is the hero. Like there was like a show where the autistic kid was like a master surgeon, and he could just like discern the problems just by looking at all these like imaginary mathematics and shit. And it's always presented, as like, little man Tate, like there are always these little geniuses, which they exist. In a lot of cases, they'll either pick up piano immediately, or they'll know chess or math or some form of this. But what they try to do is make them socially. They try to take those traits, and then they try to force the social worship of this. And it's like the two are inconsistent, because you can socially accept and even appreciate this sort of not normative behavior that's a small percentage of people generally that have these insane abilities, but are also socially either just awkward or they completely lack social, the ability to interact. But there's something novel about it, and there's something we accept about it, given the trade-off. The trade-off is you're like that, but you have these skills, you have these amazing abilities, and the two make sense to us. We accept them. We actually appreciate that dichotomy. But what the future of entertainment tries to do is they try to mash it up and make them one could be the other too, and they could be really popular and don't know what a joke is, and you're like, it just doesn't work. It's like you're not telling the truth of the matter. And what's funny and ironic about that is it actually diminishes how we ordinarily would value these kinds of outliers in people and how they operate. Is that it makes us like, what? That actually diminishes the power and the appreciation we already had by presenting it as something that it's not.
And it's like they're living the same what if scenario that the vegans are. That what
Totally.
if this, what if that? Oh, it's great. Well, until the insurance companies get involved and like, hey, all this what if stuff, we can't cover any of that because you got this guy, 1 out of 25 that can do a surgery, and the other 24 are murdering people. We can't cover that. Sorry.
Totally. Yeah, it's not based in any form of reality, and people are starting to really believe the fantasy world that they have. And again, this isn't just all these vegans. There are theists who really believe in that if we just get to this one threshold, and again, there might be some truth to it at a certain like population or homogenous area. And what I'm talking about is like not like full theocracy, but like a in-group, theologically, culturally homogenous group of people who have a dominant position on let's say just a given geography or a given culture or a given governmental body. And so that can go really well, but it also can go really bad. But it's similar like that this push, the world, Satan really pushes us to believe that there's some outcome or direction we can get to in the world, and then we end up worshiping the world. And by worshiping the world, we start telling ourselves delusions about what's possible in the world, and we start participating mostly in the world. And there's no other place you can go in the world than a direction toward your preference or your utopia as the dominant view. And if you're sold on that, whether it's veganism, strict, Ben Shapiro, strict cap, like free market guys, like any of this stuff, you're going to eventually, in places in your life or in your practice, you're going to accept, you're going to justify means. You're going to justify the ends, and we see it. I mean, that's what the biggest criticism, obviously, publicly with Jordan Peterson. It's like he's rationalizing the authoritarianism that he's been warning us about for years by his position in power and status, and likely, again, this is speculation, that he justifies not fighting it because he can fight it, in other ways if he maintains his status. And a lot of people can fall into this, where you accumulate status, you want to maintain your position and your income or whatever your connections are, and then you see what's wrong, but you think, well, I'm not going to just fight it. I have to stay with what I have, and that's a better position because I can help a little bit as long as I maintain my position. And then it's just ends up in absurdity, because the absurdity is, I'm fighting this stuff. You just have to get the jab to see my talk, and my talk's about fighting authoritarianism. And it's like the irony is like blatant. You're like, so not fighting it. So you don't get to fight it, but you're going to set up a condition where we have to participate in it. And then, but once we're in the theater, you're going to tell us how to fight it. It's so absurd. And I said this on a different stream, is that it's really a function of the following. The following actually holds you to your word and ridicules you, And so if you get to a position where you can't be criticized, or criticism actually comes outside, and this is normal. Criticism, the worst criticisms come outside. I think someone like Peterson actually knows that. From what I know, he actually seeks out external criticisms, not within his own sort of system. He wants to know other versions of why he's wrong,
That's a great thing. And God bless him, because, he really shows what it means to take the ticket and what happened.
Totally. Yeah. That's where you go. Exactly. And that's actually a really great point, because when you get mad and I get furious, you realize that, no matter who it is you're pointing to, they're always somehow in some way working with the good. Even if it occurs that like, oh, you're doing the wrong thing, you're not being honest, you're being a coward. Like you said, they're working within the good, because the good is revealed because we get to see the contrast. And that's kind of what we're seeing with all of this stuff. We're seeing so much contrast in absurdity and logic, rational and insanity. And it's almost a blessing. It's crazy to directly interact with it because you go outside. I just went to like Home Depot for something, and I just could not believe I was still seeing dads, fully brute 6'5" dads with masks on their 2-year-olds, and going and dealing with internally the anger and just the upset, but also being like, wow, the contrast. It's there's something very useful and functional about the contrast that's that's available in what we're seeing now.
All right. Well. Anyway, I appreciate all you do, and a lot of that has to do with you and Owen as far as seeing the difference between. Because even here in Central Texas, we got even the day walking to CVS or convenience store or grocery store, over half people have masks on, but a lot of them don't. A lot of resilience, but it's amazing the kind of people you see who are masked up. I'm like. But at the same time, I'm not in their face saying, don't do this, don't do that. Hey, guess what? That's your path now. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, totally.
You try to outshine the people and live your life and crush so hard that they can't deny you. And
absolutely.
I appreciate you. And
yeah, no problem, dude.
I'll let someone else talk, but nice talking to you.
Yeah, you too, man. Showing joyfulness and freedom. They almost like there are people who are just going to hate it, and that's biblical. And then they hate that you don't have fear. And then there are other people who like it, and they just need to see that it's possible. And some of us have to be the people who jump over the fence, and take the abuse. And it could be long form abuse. That's what kind of like I see as like long suffering as a virtue, where you're like. You think you're supposed to win right away because you're right about, you think you're right about the situation and the analysis of it. And you're like, I can't believe I'm not winning. And no, the virtue is actually not winning. It's that you represent what's true, even when it sucks so bad, even when it can impact your income, even when it just makes all of your previous convenience of existence, upend it, or you can't get to things, and everything's harder. That's actually the winning part. It's not the end. It's not the end where you win. I don't think any of us actually win. I mean, that's just inconsistent with my worldview. We don't win here. So anyway, I don't know. I might wrap this up. If one last person wants to chat, ask me a question, get into something, you could do that now. And then if not, I will wrap this up and then let you guys all know when I do it again, or when I get someone to come over here and try to do some debating. It would be kind of fun. Anyone else, you guys? Anything?
Hey, Jimbob.
Yo. Hey,
I have a question regarding. Sorry about audio problems earlier, but there's a new movement that I'm seeing on Twitter. It's mostly in like really Christian circles, and it's like this post-liberal thought. And I was wondering what your take is on that and their recent push of maybe discussing and popularizing Sabbath laws.
Interesting. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of the movement or the phrase. I'm honestly skeptical of Twitter. I think Twitter and Facebook, without verifying things like that are participated in with people and they could give you an overview of what it is. It's sometimes hard for me to get past the possibility that a lot of this stuff can be totally formulated, not to just discard it immediately, but without getting further into it and getting a couple of people who I know who are involved. First, there's verifying whether any movement online, Facebook, Twitter, is actually a real thing with real people, because we are at the level of like post-truth, where movements like Q or anything else could fundamentally be totally algorithm-driven by a bunch of millions of farmed accounts that are actually able to produce quite effectively rhetoric. And so, I mean, not to just say that that's what that is, but that's my first position when someone references like Twitter or Facebook and even at this point Instagram or any of the other accounts, where I'm like, wow, I can't put it past what I know is possible in that realm. So I mean, but it sounds interesting. Is there anything directly else that they're, what do you mean? Can you extrapolate on that? Like, it's a group of conservatives that are post-liberal that want to bring back a stricter version of Sabbath laws. In what regard? Is it geographic? Is it a target of regions or?
Sure. So they're based in the U.S. Most of the people who are kind of bigger in driving the discussion, but they're basically conservatives that are sick of conservatives playing like a defensive crouch conservatism.
Right.
The not doing anything, getting power, and then not actually doing anything or protecting or conserving anything.
Right.
And so maybe taking, it's instead of pointing fingers at the left or, and saying, oh, look how morally inferior these people are, they're instead focused on creating, is similar to like Owen's like idea of, okay, I'm just going to build this parallel society,
right.
But instead it's not building a parallel society, but it's offering a different society than the one we have and trying to popularize that in a way.
Right.
New Polity is a pretty popular publication, and they're interesting. They have a good YouTube channel and a great website if you want to learn more about it. But I was just wondering if you'd heard of that at all.
What's the name again that you just said? New what?
New Polity.
New Polity?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that stuff's just going to pop up everywhere. I mean, I've been on Gab. A lot of it is similar. There's like an overlapping on Gab of like just conservative complainers, and then people who are actually like, well, what are we going to do? Like let's do something. And some of the irony there, and I witnessed this with my own life, is that that the more you do in that direction, almost the less you're seen on any platforms. They help. It's like you organize, but then how do you make it come into existence? And it's almost like the measure to which you create a parallel existence. Really, I see that as, do you have direct control or access to supply chains at a local level that you're nearly unaffected by any sort of hiccups or purposeful hiccups in the system? And then if you are in that existence, it's almost like, I might be wrong about this because the rate of technology is that that the level to which you're succeeding at that is represented by the level to which you're absent online. And I just don't know if that's true. That might be just a bad hunch. It seems like that might be the case, is that there's this irony of like, we got to push, and you're online and you're doing all this stuff and you get all these things going and you get on all the accounts and you're online and then the irony is that you want to build something, but inevitably that thing is actually in the physical. So all the time that we spend doing what we're doing online, are we actually spending as much time building that one thing that's actually boring, that doesn't give us like cortisol, doesn't give us the dopamine immediately, doesn't give us the chemical response of some new idea that's exciting, like a parallel society, but really it's as boring as you got one wall up on the chicken coop. You know what I mean? Like the boringness, and not to say spiritually or that you can't have like this like spike in appreciation, accomplishment after you get the coop up, right? You're like, holy shit, I just built that. I built the planter bed, accomplishment. But it's just interesting that our senses, our ideas of a movement are so, they can be real too. It's just that they get so big and exciting that we're almost like don't want to spend time putting the nail in the studs because it's not as exciting. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's the case with a lot of people. I can just see that as a potential downfall to anything that's emerging that almost gains too much popularity online that it fizzles out in the physical because the physical ends up not matching the excitement of online. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Kind of like how people who are doing like anonymous work, working for Anonymous, those people for like that Wall Street BS that was happening back in 2008, when they were, you'd get people really pissed off online. They'd do all this stuff online, but could they get people there? And I mean, that kind of proves against what you were saying in that they did end up having enough fire in their bellies to get out there and go do something about it. But I mean, I definitely see what you're saying because I see that happen all the time. People talk about things online, hype it up, and then you hear like, all right, guys, we're going to meet up. We're going to do this. And it just never happens.
It's almost like the threshold is the moment you get approached to be co-opted. In other words, a lot of things can be grassroots. A lot of things aren't. They're just fake grassroots. But something's grassroots legitimately, and it reaches this point. There's this weird moment where another entity comes in, like a Charlie Kirk or, equivalent, and they're like, we love what you guys are doing. We're going to get the funding. And then whoever's leading or, whoever's there gets a little bit excited because this means something about the movement. It's like you work this hard and now this is, you'll process it in your mind as like, this is your reward, but tickets can come in the form of help. Tickets, take the ticket. It can come in the form of what looks like immediately like a win. You're like, we worked so hard at this thing. But I feel like there might be this threshold, and it might be if you become big enough as a grassroots toward a movement of building, and you become big enough in a certain sphere, in this case, digital, news, entertainment kind of sphere, enough to a shark sniffs you out and comes in and goes, I can use this as like proxy. Yeah, no, we're all about what you guys do. We want to inject you guys with funds. You guys keep what you're doing. We love the narrative. We love what you're doing. And they have another alternate use for you that doesn't stop you from going on with what you're doing online, but then you end up being used in conjunction with their goals, but they got the money now. And so it almost looked like and I've seen that happen in certain ways. And so I wonder if that's actually the point where you pull the parachute, you actually go away from it when it looks like it's the biggest opportunity of your life or the biggest opportunity for said movement. That's when you go, no, now it's no movement. Like there's actually something legitimate about no movement, right? Like how sometimes Owen references revolution. When it feels like a revolution, you're going in a circle. So it's like, you know what I mean? So there's a point where the lulls are actually something useful. And so, not that speaks to any one individual in that arena or, because it's usually a group of people and they hash it out and they go, this is a big deal. Like the first time I saw like Candace Owens, I knew she was going to get co-opted. I remember like commenting on her videos when she was nobody. And I was like, she got talk about identity politics. She has all of it. The right conservative Inc. wants a black feisty girl, who can, trash talk and talk fast and all this stuff. And I was like, she's going to get tapped. Basically, they're going to come over and go, hey, she's a good example of like, you fight for something. All of them, Jordan Peterson, you put them on this little throne. Once they reach a certain level of reach, and then they can't let go of it because they like it. It's like I earn this, we earn this, guys. But sometimes it's just better to just go, okay, this is the movement. We're building this, and if you reach a point where someone else is then co-opting you and deciding what's being built in exchange for giving you a lot of money or resources, then you're no longer building the thing someone else is building. And sometimes it's really hard, I think, for people, and nothing against them. That's what makes us human. We're all vulnerable to some level of that. And so it's.
I think the most recent example of kind of what you're talking about could be Joe Rogan and Spotify and his selling of soul. But I mean, have you seen any other examples of that kind of happening with, people similar to Candace Owens or Peterson?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes sort of martyred. I mean, you look at the Rittenhouse thing, like these the sharks, they just they look and they go, oh, like a new character. It's like they release a new character for like X-Men. It's similar to that, where it's like, oh, whether they're a victim, on the left they use a victim. It's like a martyr sacrifice. On the right, it's like a hero, and it's always the same similar paradigm. There's a hero on the right, and it's his American flag. Basically these people like the American flag. Like the opacity. You put a symbol over your profile pic, and it's kind of like there's an opacity to it. Like they see people, and oh, let's sell them like that, and then they're the hero, and then so I see people like Kyle Rittenhouse. I see Jordan Peterson is one of those people. I think Dave Rubin, like that whole like parade of people that use personalities, and then they also appeal to identity politics. I think they all get to a certain level, even Ben Shapiro, where they're just sitting pretty. They get to a level, they make some deals with people, bigger entities, and then they become the version that they kind of can do. They're like, I can do this. I'll just do this. And then they don't want to move or say anything too bad, right? Because then they lose their spot. And then, but then I wonder if like, part of me realizes that like I don't need them to do anything else, because maybe that's just their role. It's like, not that it's okay to lie for money. It's not okay for Jordan Peterson to be a coward and not turn down the vax menus. Like that's not okay. But it does show, like the other guy was saying, it shows a contrast. And then you go, oh, well, now I know what that looks like. Now I know what it looks like when people do get co-opted by a lot of money or fame or anything else, and then they kind of like level out, and we definitely, I think Joe Rogan is one of the best examples, I think, of that, because he went from pointing at anything, pointing out maybe less stuff, to then just kind of being like a ping, like those automatic ping pong, like his podcasts are just, he gets a person who's a real person who plays ping pong, and he's just like the automatic return ping pong player, and ping pong is the conversation of whatever he's having, and it's like he doesn't actually dig really deep. He just stays right kind of on the coast. It's real work, and then you're like, I don't think so. Hey, Osama bin Broccoli.
Hey, dude, what's up?
How are you doing? Got
Very
a couple
good.
people.
Very big fan of you. Follow you on Instagram. I like the paintings and drawings you do.
Oh, thanks, man.
Really good.
How'd you come up? I like your online name.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I was talking to this Iranian earlier on this other server, and he asked me a question. Like we were talking about that stuff, and he asked me like, do you think that your country has too much freedom with regards to like all the free pornos online and all that shit? And like, what do you think about that question? Like, do we have too much freedom in this country, like with regards to all that shit?
Yeah, I think it's the reverse. I think the demand for all that shit is responded to with the ubiquitous nature of its delivery, and so I think it's a measure of departure, and so the question ends up being, is it easier for cultures to depart from good and go into degeneracy without strictness? And I would say to some extent yes, but ultimately it can't be the legality that determines the moral condition of the society. The people have to, at the individual level, and that's why a spiritual battle is always at the individual, and then a collection of individual battles that are being mostly won. Of course, we can't fully win because I believe we're fallen and we're basically born into a sinful nature, so we're always battling it. But if we were to say there's a level of like condensed people, a homogenous culture that are actually winning that battle and not being led and dominated by their vices, they might have laws that reflect the level of their morality, but it's not the law that determined their level of morality. So some people think like, if you lock down the freedom, then maybe it'll guide their morality. I think it's more like in our country, we've been so usury based and so living luxuriously. Even our poorest live more luxurious than the poor people around the world. They're still luxurious, and so I think there's a more of a long process that we're at the hopefully nearing the end of, where we've in short been sitting pretty, making weak men, making men who can get by and survive easily, and also be fully enveloped in their vices. And so there's something about not the law or freedom. It's more like the freedom of time that we have. It's not the freedom of freedom itself, like law. I think it's time. We're not demanded of as men to go fix the thing, or you go out and scar our hands because we have to keep up the generator or whatever. There's no real hardship that we've experienced since probably not coincidentally like the moon landing, since debt just blossomed and you can just borrow time with usury money. Also the supply chains, I think, have to do with it. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, you got a really good point about how it's not so much about the laws that we write and more about the collective morality of a society. So you look at the United States, for instance, and you look at the obscenity laws. It's already illegal to publish pornography in the United States. There are laws on the books right now in the United States where you could lock someone up in prison for producing and distributing pornography under the obscenity laws. The problem is that what happens is if one would theoretically try to take a case and pursue an obscenity law, it would come down to a legal argument of what definitionally is considered obscene. And that is always going to be filtered through the lens of society as it is now, rather than when the law was written. And so you can prosecute people for under obscenity laws in the United States, but the problem is that you're going to enter a courtroom and the judge and the jury is going to say, well, I don't really consider pornography that obscene. Everyone uses it. So
yeah, you're totally right. That's exactly what it is. The law, it's not just the law, that the cultural acceptable norms of the collective will dictate even how that law is processed or interpreted. And so you're still stuck. You can have the strictest laws, right, and have the most degenerate collective society, and then you could filter that through that lens, and it'll produce a result that's not as punitive as you'd like. And then there's just against law, like not against law, like outside of law. Is just my example is like there's a little town, and there's someone who enters the town and is just acting belligerent and maybe half nude, even if it's like a dude, even if they're not like homeless, right? Because there's like a pass that we give on homeless people, but before there was a level of obscenity that would be responded to not even legally but just socially and culturally, where you were shamed or embarrassed or removed to some extent or pressured out of a scenario given how obscene you were in contrast to the rest of the people. And I think that's at the regional or local or very local level. I think something like that has kind of gone out the window because people are now like, if it's not bothering, it's not bothering me. It's like this libertarian, it's not bothering me and they're not taking my stuff, so I'm going to stay out of it. It's not my place. And it's like, well, kind of what that's contributing to it. Oh, it's not my place. It's like, it kind of is your place, it kind of is your place. This is your place, like literally your place, like you're in the
Look,
place.
I have a good example of this. So if say you have like a shitty neighbor who like steals stuff off your front lawn, right? Say like you have these really cool gnomes, garden gnomes that you love, and they're on your front lawn, and every now and then your neighbor, he comes up and steals it, right? He steals a garden gnome. If you call the police, they're going to send a police officer out. He's going to come out. He's going to take your statement. He's going to knock on the front door of your neighbor, and then he's going to come back to you and say, "There's nothing we can do." There's nothing we can do. Sorry about that, right? And you'll be upset because it's like, well, I know he steals it. If you go into his house and they say, "Yeah, but we don't really have probable cause to enter someone's home. You need proof or evidence," right? So the very fact that the laws exist to prevent theft, right, and the laws exist to protect your property, that in and of itself is kind of the incorrect way to look at what a law is. A law is the explicit expression of what defines a social limit of acceptable behavior, right? And so the police officer is not going to enforce theft laws because the time and resources and the will to action are not there, right? What's better is what's going to be more likely to give you a good outcome is if you go to your other neighbors and say, "This dude's stealing shit from my front lawn. Has he stolen anything from you?" And to create to rally around in that issue and then actually confront the person. And, you're more likely to get your stuff back if you just jump their fence and walk through their back door and grab it, right? That's how you're going to get your stuff back, not by calling the police, because the police won't help you to do that because there's no will there to do it.
Not only that, but sometimes based on the approach, the group of people that does confront the person, depending on the approach, could actually impact the person in a positive way. And so you've seen this in groups before where the person either gets banished or just totally like shamed and isolated, or there's actually like a garden, a garden branch, an olive branch, that's like an opening for redemption in the community. And like the opportunity for redemption is sometimes really pulling to people, like and there's this weird thing where as a community you want to throw people out, or you want to, because the police, they're not going to do anything, but you're not going to create a little jail. You're not going to like harm the person, but you're going to seek some level of justice in some way. And I think that went away. I mean, now people are so isolated. You don't actually really a lot of times know your neighbors. And if you do, it's hardly likely that you'll all share similar general values, philosophically, theologically, culturally. And so there's like this, that's another thing that I wanted to address with this particular topic, is that when you atomize and sprinkle society, a bunch of different spices on one location, the connections there, the homogeny is lost. And so the oomph effort, like you're talking about, that example of the neighbors, there might be a universal, near universal response to certain things, maybe like theft, but other things where it varies a lot, like what's indecent generally, weird, stuff, flags and stuff. It's funny that I'm saying that because I used to make fun of people and be like, "Oh, it's free speech, you put whatever you want." Well, no, if you take that to its logical end, someone can just hang like, a picture of a dildo, and it's like technically not a dick, and it's not nudity, but it's a toy, but it's also foul.
I have a great thought experiment for free speech absolutists, and I would just pose them this question. Say, like a degenerate billionaire moves in next door, and he puts up a massive LED screen, and he's just playing hardcore pornography on it 24/7. Right. And you can see it from every window in your house. You can see this giant LED screen with hardcore pornography playing on it 24/7. Now, would a free speech absolutist say, I don't want to see that, I don't want my kids seeing that, I don't want children in the neighborhood seeing that, because I think it degrades the social common morality of the place I live in and makes the area that I live in ugly? Or would the free speech absolutist say, yeah, okay, the degenerate billionaire gets to play his hardcore degenerate pornography?
Is there an HOA in this thought experiment?
Is the HOA, yeah. Is it's an HOA? I don't know where you are. We have HOAs.
Yeah.
Home.
Yeah, councils, we call them here. I'm in Australia.
That would actually be a funny meme. Is like there's something so degenerate, and the absolutist goes, well, I really don't like that, and I think it's terrible for my kids and cultural in general, but I will die for them. I will die for them for the right to just. And then the screen's like up behind him in the background. It's just like totally blurred out.
Some
I don't approve of your Brazilian art born, but I would die for your right to play it 24/7 in my backyard.
Exactly.
Sharing your stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I got over that thing. I thought that was a good stance to take. Like even now, like that's why I was. It's not preferable to be canceled because it's annoying, but there's something really great and useful about cancel culture because it means that you and us and people can actually use the same methodology, and that's the trick with that right-left shit where, Ben Shapiro's like, the cancel culture is terrible, and you're like, no, we can use that. It's just that the dominant paradigm of ideology is monopolizing what gets canceled. You don't really disagree with the culture of canceling people. You disagree, if you were honest, you disagree with the fundamental reasoning, like the ideology behind the canceling. What's being canceled, what's not. Like child porny kind of weird shit, but not farming. Like, obviously it's not about, canceling, because we would want to, I would want to cancel certain things if I could. If I could, I would get certain content distant from me or not arising in my direct vicinity physically or digitally. And so it's like, I'm totally.
I would say the validity to the criticism of cancel culture, the only reason why I would agree with that on principle is because we don't have a common limiting principle that we can apply to everyone, right? So it's like we don't have a common morality. In a Christian society, there's a common morality, and that limiting principle is applied to everyone within society. And so if you get cancelled, then it's because you violated a principle, a limiting principle that everyone has in common and they accept. The only reason why the criticisms of cancel culture today are valid is because there is no limiting principle, there is no valid framework by which we can say, okay, that's something that's outside the limits of acceptable behavior, and that isn't.
Well, in modern society, it's a secular religion.
Right, and it's progressivism or secularism is based on there's no real truth or telos. Like so if there's neither of those, then there's no real standard. You're just dealing with trends, and that's what we see. Like that's why we see someone who is worshipped one year is canceled the next, and everyone's confused, and even the faux right will be like, oh my God, they're canceling. You're like, it's not about the cancellation. It's the philosophy that needs to be sort of refuted and shared in a way that it gets constantly refuted and rejected. It's never the behavior necessarily. Some behavior outright can be rejected, but this is why it's such an interesting thing is that you see a progressive secular culture that has no real foundation for truth at all. They have no access or justification for absolutes. They don't have a justification for logic and reasoning existing in a strict material world that came from a cosmic fart. They don't have a direction where we ought to go because it's strictly trend driven. And so one person's celebration is next year's cancellation. And but if we were looking at it honestly, like really strictly, it would be that philosophy, and that's just a consequence of the philosophy. But that's what's so annoying about the sort of modern faux right, is that they're so hungry. They don't want to really attack philosophy. They want to go, oh my gosh. And then,
also, the thing about the right is I don't accept their criticism of cancel culture, because they engage with it. They engage in cancel culture, I think, actually more vociferously than the left wing does, right? So you have Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder, and anyone right of them is a Nazi, right? So they engage in that, and they engage it in such a way that it's a complete deplatforming and a complete ostracization from their political movement. Whereas with, progressives, I've thought this for a long time now. The only way to be a progressive today, to be like a political progressive today, is to be pro-pedophile and pro-trans child. Like progressives back in the day were like, oh, we want, more taxes for rich people and free healthcare. Now progressives are like, I think we should be able to fuck children and marry dogs.
Totally.
I mean, really, that's 50% of conservatives too. So. Yeah.
Well, now we're transcending beyond the obvious faux paradigm, because like there are certain topic, if you're on the right and you even question NASA's function, you're a lunatic. So now that's beyond left and right. So there are some things that demonstrate, wow, it really isn't just, it's still political, I think, because I think political and economic and entertainment is all one. It used to be like three circles, like, remember at the fair, you take three circles and you kind of like try to hide the middle triangle or whatever. I see them as three, but now they're so indistinguishable, like entertainment, politics, and what was the other one? Economics. They're all tied and interrelated, and so they go like, if you mention the moon landing or NASA or whatever to Steven Crowder, like I can't have that. I can't. They won't even attack. There's like a certain threshold of there's a certain range of discourse that includes the binary of left right, but it's not distinct about the left and right. It's like a range generally that you can't pass. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so like George Bush is now an American hero.
Right, from the left.
Yeah, exactly.
And a Texan.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Texan too. Yeah,
like a selective Overton window.
Yeah, totally. It just keeps moving, changing, and it's just never addressed. And again, it's not like it's almost like if you these people can gain from it in some way. They're almost like the newscasters who know they're lying and they're hired presenters. They're literally actors. They can reason in their head. They go, well, if you're dumb enough to believe what I'm saying, that's on you. And for the people who know better, they just don't watch me. So I don't have really a guilty conscience. It's like, it's on you. It's that old, like, you got chutzpah, kid, like just trick.
Going back a little bit to Joe Rogan, the media now has come out full force and is now trying to gaslight people into believing that the term mass formation psychosis is not like a legitimate term within the field of psychology. And like I read about mass formation psychosis back in the day when I was an atheist, because I believed that religious experiences were mass formation psychosis, and that was the grounds on which a lot of atheists would criticize, visions of miracles. Well, the apostles they didn't really see Christ walk on water. They experienced a mass formation psychosis, right? And so that was the the way to explain away a collective. That's
traditionally what they've referred to as mass hysteria.
But now, now if you look it up in the media now, they've got all these psychologists coming out saying it's debunked. It's the newest right-wing conspiracy buzzword, mass formation psychosis. It's not a legitimate concept. It's not real in psychology.
It almost makes you, like there's another one. What was the other one? Mass, it had to do with illness. Mass illness or something like that, where it's like the same phenomenon, but it's specifically about actually experiencing symptomatic things based on the belief that you've been exposed to those things.
Mass psychosomatic.
Mass psych.
Mass
psych illness or whatever.
So an illness that is produced by your mind is a psychosomatic illness. Mass psychosomatic illness.
Anyone else? I see a couple people have their mics off. I didn't know if you want to say something.
Well, I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to debate Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, I would debate him as him, and that's my condition.
Okay. Well, hang on, let me just go get him, because he's here right now. Let me just go get him.
Oh, you have one? Oh, here we go.
Oh, okay, hi. Hi, how are you? My name's it's me. Wait, who are you?
Well, I'm a version of you, It's like we have, I don't know if you adopt solipsism or anything like that, but we're essentially...
No, that's not possible, because I'm me. You can't be me. That's not possible.
I mean, it could be both ways, you don't know. How would you come to know that?
That's a good question. And I would have to think, about that for a very long time.
Well, here's the thing, bucko.
Now listen here, pal. I'm not your bucko, pal, okay?
It's pretty good, dude.
Thanks, man.
I am
Yeah, another thing is like, how come, why is, like, people in America right now, like, so obsessed with, like, race and shit and, like, all this, like, fucking anti-white shit and, like, it's fucking...
Yo, I actually want to jump in on this. You guys were talking about NASA. You guys so I'm sure you guys are educated on, like, Nazi belief systems and, like, obviously their whole thing is, like, the Great White Brotherhood.
Oh, yeah, I'm super familiar with that.
Well, and like Himmler was like trying to find Atlantis and like the Aryan bloodline and all that stuff.
Hyperborea, yeah.
Well, I'm just like wondering how weird it is that like we're not taught about the Holocaust. We're not taught about like with Atlantis and like this Great White Brotherhood stuff. We're just given like the fear porn of like Schindler's List and like mass murder.
6 million.
I don't think it's about the Bolsheviks either.
Well, and I'm realizing how weird it is now, like, things like Gaia, there's a website called Gaia, and, like, Joe Rogan has a lot of people on who, like, talk about Atlantis. It's, like, this resurgence of, like, Atlantis and, like, Gaia knowledge is coming back, and it's, like, that's exactly what the Nazis were into. And yet Trump is Nazi, not the people who are, like, going back to Atlantis. I don't know if that sparks a conversation with any of you guys. I just wanted to bring it up.
Well, the Nazis were kind of liberals. The idea that, like, the Nazis were, like, right-wing Christians is wrong. They were, like, occultist liberals in reality. They were opposed to church interference in the state completely.
Wait, doesn't the left say, like, the Nazis were fascist and the right say that they were socialist?
Well, nationalist. Well, so they are. Yeah, they're national. The Nazis were national socialists, but that's the thing is the difference between the communist and the Nazi isn't really their position on the political compass. It's just their understanding of how a corporation has a relationship with the state.
What was that, Peterson?
So the difference between a Nazi and a communist isn't really their position on the political compass. It's more how they view the relationship between a corporation and a state.
It's Nazi.
Nazi. I did not see that coming.
Isn't the whole like anti-white thing happening from like the media and all that shit because they're just trying to divide us and conquer us? Like it's
that's what I was saying. Like,
yeah.
What's up with the whole race issue in this country?
Oh, they're doing that.
It's all fetishized and shit. It's all fucking crazy.
This is something that, Tucker Carlson said, which I think was a brilliant observation. And, the communist memes immediately started when he said this, but that the idea that what actually divides American society today isn't race, it's actually class. And he's not completely wrong. He's more right than people think. But the difference is that, people would think that the difference is between, the lower class and kind of the upper class, it's, factory workers versus the managers of the factory, the guy who runs the factory, right? He manages the people. He's the person he's in economic conflict with. But in reality, that's not the case. It's actually the bottom and the top kind of crushing the middle. The factory floor manager, he is, the working class person, same as the guy who works on the factory floor. The top isn't even the dude who owns the factory anymore, who runs the factory. That's not even the dude on the top. On the top is the guy who sits at the top of the very pyramid of the parent corporations, who sits behind 20 separate layers of separate corporations and indemnity, who owns the parent company, who owns the sister-daughter company, that owns the factory, that's leased to a separate offshore corporation. That's the, it's like Jeff Bezos is he's not the dude who owns the factory. He's the dude who owns the country that the factory exists in.
So how are y'all feeling that in Australia specifically? Class systems.
So in Australia, it's very similar to America, I would say. We have a kind of a quite a large underclass in society. I'm a member of that underclass.
Aboriginal and so-called whites, whatever that means, right?
Aboriginals are kind of statistically they're fairly irrelevant to Australian society. They're kind of statistically they're irrelevant.
Racist.
So, but when you do like population surveys and stuff, like they kind of don't really matter. Put
them in the camps.
So now, like, I'm a part of a permanent underclass right now, at least for the foreseeable future, because I refuse. I will not get hired in the near future because of this.
Yeah, they're trying to pull that over here too.
Do you know the numbers? Could you say that? Could you make a speculative guess of like percent underclass versus other?
So I would have to look at the numbers of people who are on welfare, because we have quite a large welfare state here in Australia, and I looked at the last time I checked the vaccination rate here in Australia. Something like 90% of the country is vaccinated. So assuming that 10% of the country is unvaccinated, and assuming that none of them will be vaccinated in the future, it's kind of a big assumption. But assuming that, then that's a 10% increase to overall unemployment in the country if that continues.
Well, then they'll just, say you don't get unemployment without a double jab because, you can get the check sick.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
And all about these too, so you can finish. It's nice.
I feel like those numbers are bigger. I feel like the media has been lying to everyone, even in America and shit, though, about the unvaccinated number. Like we've been seeing the media lying nonstop.
I'd want to see the numbers of people who are double vaxxed, okay? Because the numbers of people who have got the first vaccine, that's a significant number. But what would actually tell us how effective the psych warfare has been is how many people took the second dose.
The narrative fails.
Yeah, and so that's the number that I would look at.
It's went up. Has your death rate stayed the same roughly after all this 90+% getting jabbed?
Yeah, death rate's the same. Yeah, so I just looked at the numbers. There's 5 1.4 million people on welfare right now in Australia. And if you want to say that people on welfare are a member of the underclass, and you got over 5 million people who are a member of the underclass here. And you, like, the economic situation in this country is, I would say it's probably fairly similar to what you're seeing in America. My generation won't be able to ever own land unless we inherit it. We're not, our future isn't high paid. It's going to be kind of middle manager busy work for the people who make it in, and for the rest of the people it's going to be low skilled labor jobs or welfare.
You're gonna have to redefine what inherited means, and I think that means like force. That was the original inheritance, is you just use force and take more land. You guys, I have to go. You guys obviously hang out and stay. It's awesome. Such a great first run at this. I'm really glad I put this up, because this is kind of the format of conversing I prefer. It's fun to do the rants, live streams, and I won't stop that, but it's cool to actually talk to people directly and share all this stuff. So good night to you guys, and I'll probably do this. I don't even know.
Good night. Thanks for all this. This is awesome. This is cool.
I am gay. This is great. Great conversation. This is very important that we have these conversations.
Yes. All right. See you guys. Later, man.
See you. All right, later.